The Blood of Dawnwalker have just released their first cinematic trailer and behind the scenes discussion with the development team, which has uncovered so many new details about this game. The Blood of Dawnwalker is the first of 3 games in this fantasy action RPG saga developed by Rebel Wolves, who include the game director of Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and narrative director of Cyberpunk 2077. And that means this game is stacked to be incredible, and from what we've seen so far it looks like it's heading in that direction, with a real passion project behind it of this development team to give us something that's unique, detailed, and really draws back on the old RPG style that we would have known from years ago. In this video I'm going to go over the 10 most important details from all these reveals so you guys can get a real picture of what's going to be coming in this game when it releases in the future. The first thing we have to talk about when it comes to this game is the setting, because it's completely built for an RPG of this scale. The game takes place in 14th century Europe in a place called Vale Sangora, which is designed to mimic a lot of Eastern European, Romanian and Baltic elements. Where we pick up in the cinematic trailer, the land is riddled with plague, famine, and a lot of tyrannical lords who are looking to assert their dominance over the villagers and people who live there. That is until the vampires take over. After waiting in the shadows for a while, they decide now is the perfect time to strike against humanity and take over. But they don't just go through and kill everybody like you may expect, they actually take over control of the land and the people within it, removing the plague and famine that had cursed them and offering them salvation and protection in exchange for blood. And where the beginning of the playable game is set is 2 years after this takeover, where we'll play as Coen in his fight against this vampiric rule. And Coen is this main character we're going to be playing as throughout the game. He is actually the person you saw in the cinematic trailer carrying his sister who had the plague at the time away from the feudal lord who had been hunting them. But Coen is just a human here and doesn't have a lot of power to fight the vampires just yet. However, when we pick up with him at the start of the game, you can see that he's been turned into a Dawnwalker. A Dawnwalker is distinctly different from the vampires themselves, as a Dawnwalker isn't fully turned. They sit in this limbo period between human, who can go out in the daytime, and vampire, who can only go out at night. A Dawnwalker can traverse both of these worlds, having almost the benefits and disadvantages of both. From what we know of the basic plot, Coen is trying to save his family, who at this point in the game have been imprisoned by Brencis, the main vampire that we saw in the cinematic trailer, and he has to fight using his Dawnwalker abilities and try and get to his families in time. I think this parallel is incredible, trying to balance the human elements where he can only fight with the sword and has minimal strength, with the nighttime vampire abilities where he has a lot more control and ability to do cool things. I think the tension between his inner self of both human and vampire will really come out as you flesh out the game. But let's delve a little bit more into those vampires themselves, because they are so unique in this game compared to what we may traditionally know. For example, you may have seen in the cinematic trailer that Brencis has a lot of teeth, and teeth have a massive impact on the vampires in this game. The vampires in Blood of Dawnwalker continuously grow their teeth, so the length of one's teeth is a symbol of how old of a vampire they are and how powerful they are. Their teeth are invisible until they open their mouth, where they can extend these teeth, which is kind of gross to be honest, but show their full power in that sense. Teeth are also the only way that someone can be turned into a vampire. As I briefly mentioned, they will be trading blood as a healing source, which we saw in the cinematic trailer for his sister, but she is not turned into a vampire in this sense like you may know from some other vampire stories. You actually have to remove your tooth as a vampire and stab it in the heart of your victim to turn them into a vampire also. I think this is an incredible way of representing teeth within vampires instead of just two fangs like we're used to. The teeth play a really major role in the whole development of the vampire story in the game. But let's talk about Brencis, the main vampire, the leader of them all and the one who took over humanity in this element of the story. As I said, this isn't black and white in the sense that Brencis just took over humanity and enslaved them. There is this almost trade system where he presented himself as a messiah, a saviour, removing the tyrannical feudal lords and putting himself in the position of power instead, taking away the plague and famine that had been so detrimental to the people, and instead just asking for a little bit of blood in return. And he does this through blood masses, which is almost like a religious ceremony where he gives the people his blood to heal them and help them, and he requires their blood in exchange for his feeding. But don't get me wrong, this isn't a pleasant experience. The vampires will feed on anybody, whether you're weak, young, old or frail, and this could result in your death when you go to these blood masses. It's this real trade and it's this grey area of good versus evil, which we will explore here in a second. We also know that Brencis is holding executions during this time of criminals and other people that he deems worthy of dying, and will do this by draining their blood entirely. Brencis is really in control of this land at this point, and why he is phrased as the main antagonist for the game, because he's taken Coen's family. Coen has to fight against him, his other vampires, and a lot of other enemies to try and get his family saved, and unfortunately Brencis has a lot of power that he can hold over you. But this really brings into contention this idea of good versus evil that they want to explore within the game. It's not clear cut Brencis is bad because he's a vampire, because the feudal lords that were there beforehand were equally as bad. We saw them about to kill Coen's sister already, so was the trade-off really worth it? Is having this idea of the famine and the poison and the curse gone from your land worth a bit of blood for the people? They seem to think so in the moment, or maybe they didn't have as much choice as we thought. Throughout the entire game there's going to be this undertone of what is good, what is evil, and where's the grey area in between that we as Coen get to play as. After all, we are fighting both sides, the good human side in theory and the dark vampire side, but where do those two merge as Coen being a Dawnwalker? I think this theme is really interesting. I personally love this within games, TV shows, films, where you don't have a straight answer to what is good, what is bad. Yes, you might know that Coen is the protagonist and Brencis is the antagonist, but how that develops and how your choices in the game change it will be really interesting. And choice is everything in this game. They've described it as a narrative sandbox. Sandbox typically meaning go around, do what you want within a game, something like GTA, but they've coined this term of narrative sandbox instead, which really means your decisions impact the narrative, and that is what's important to shape your story. They've been very clear that there are multiple different paths you can go down, and there isn't a main quest and side quest system. It's explore the world, find opportunities, and however you want to develop the story, whatever paths you want to take, whatever allies and enemies you want to make, that is how you're going to get to the ending that you have chosen. Again, a concept I absolutely love for this game. It's not as clear cut as, yes, you're going to take this path to get to Brencis and fight him at the end of the game and that's it over. No, what you do along the way matters a lot, and the micro choices that you make will impact the end story, whether Coen's family gets saved, whether Brencis gets taken down, what happens to the other vampires and the land generally. It all has impact, which is just such a great idea for an RPG. You're not just fighting against Brencis though, you're also fighting against the time within the game. Within this narrative sandbox, you have 30 days and 30 nights to get to the ending of the game, however you choose. Now you could do that in 10 days if you wanted, or stretch it out to the 30th if you want to risk playing that close to the line, but you get to decide. And the way that time moves forward in the game is by completing missions. The way they've coined it is that time is a resource you get to choose how you spend. You can absolutely go explore the world, time won't move on, and be absolutely fine in that sense. But the moment you want to knuckle down and start getting missions done and progressing the story, that's when time is going to start moving forward. Some missions may cost you a couple days or a couple nights. Some missions may cost you a week, some may just a few hours. But they will cost something and progress the story even further, and you will have to balance that based on how you want to move through the game. This really means that no two playthroughs are going to be the same, and you get to control how your path goes across this 30-day time limit. Throughout your custom narrative game, you will also get to encounter other characters and enemies that will shape the way that story unfolds. Different paths you choose, such as different allies you make and different enemies you encounter and decide to defeat, may completely change what happens in response within the game. Brencis is going to be an active antagonist, which means he won't just sit back till you get to him as the final boss. He will respond based on the choices you make. You may unlock a new area and he may put a patrol there or a guard station to stop you moving any further. You may make a certain ally which opens up a secret route that he will try to block off. You may defeat one of his generals who completely open up a new area of the map. There will be lots of different choices, and Brencis will make up for this by trying to stop you in different ways. In terms of other characters that we know are already there, he has 3 vampire generals or allies that we have already seen within the cinematic trailer. They're going to be a key part and offer different elements in the story. I can already see that one of them clearly seems like a warrior who might be controlling Brencis' army, another one is more mage-like, and another one is more brawler-like. So they may all have their different avenues that you can explore by trying to fight them before you get to Brencis to diminish his hold on the area. Different characters may also become allies or enemies depending on how you interact with them, at what stage you interact with them, and really shape the story massively. One of the key design elements of this game is this idea of realism versus magic. You can't have a vampire game that's completely realistic, but a lot of the main setting, this idea of the plague and the character development and the stories and motivations, is all based on a lot of realism, with this magical twist on the end. And they've been very clear this magical element isn't your traditional shooting fireballs and spell casting, but it's more of this paranormal activity and this almost realism based magic that changes the atmosphere of the game and gives it that magical feel without making it feel almost cliche-ish. So between both the art theme and the gameplay theme, you'll see a lot of elements of both realism and a lot of touching stories and this magical element that underpins it all that just elevates the story massively. And then the final thing I want to briefly touch on is the music. They've absolutely nailed this one out the park. You can hear it in some of the background music that I'm playing now, but they've really gone all out for this. And what can you expect from the people who made The Witcher and Cyberpunk? Like, music is an element to this RPG style, and they've really gone to town to make it work. I'm so excited for this game. It's going to be a little while before it comes out, probably into 2026, but we will get a gameplay reveal trailer in the summer, which will be great, and I'm just so excited for it. So please let me know down in the comments, what do you think? What are you looking forward to? And are you going to play The Blood of Dawnwalker?